it from.
So what happened then? You have to remember here that the Hebrews really were in Egypt and what their status was. Early writers have, okay, I'm going to start that again. So what really happened? You have to remember here that the Hebrews really were in Egypt and what their status was. Early writers had to have an excuse why the people wanted to leave. They have blamed this on the terrible slave conditions which they were forced to endure. Therefore, they wrote that all Hebrews were enslaved, that there were Hebrew slaves may well be true, but to a much smaller degree. Remember that Joseph brought many people into Egypt. He bought up much of their land. But try to remember who Joseph married, the high priestess of On. His family would have continued in this position and status level. His daughters would have been made high priestesses of Isis and their brothers priests also. The Hebrews then that we are concerned with, the actual participants in the Exodus, were not slaves, but rather nobility, whose status was just below that of Pharaoh himself. Isis was one of the most powerful of Egyptian goddesses. She gave the Pharaoh his divine right to rule. The symbol she wears on her head is called the Muat, the foundation of the throne. The Egyptian pharaoh's power relied on very strict adherence to certain religious beliefs and traditions. Religion was part of the very fabric of Egyptian society. Earth civilization today have no equivalent of this, thereby making it almost impossible to imagine. Their religion was Egypt. Pharaoh was the link between them and their gods. He was a man-made god given authority by the goddess Isis. The priests and priestesses of Isis were then vital to the maintenance of order. Now, do you remember who has control of their entire Isis order? Joseph and his descendants, the Hebrews. Now that you realize this, let's look at the story of Moses. Some of its parts that had been seen totally inscrutable should now become plain as day. First, I need to give you a brief synopsis of the true Exodus. According to established Egyptian history, you atheists who say it never happened are dead wrong on this one. The official Egyptian history records that Isis/Hathor had a very bad argument with her father Ra over her right to call some of the Egyptians and Hebrew people hers. Translation: there was a turf war between the priestesses of Isis and the priests of the other Egyptian gods. Isis then took all her priestesses, priests, their family, and their servants and slaves and left Egypt for 40 years. Her main temple or headquarters was moved to Philae, to the city of Hazor. This is recorded history. It actually happened, and there is more than enough Bible correlation as you are about to see. If Moses was a male figure invented to take over the historical role of a woman, who was the actual woman he replaced? The high priestess of Isis, direct descendant of Joseph, a Hebrew called Miriam. Miriam is the Hebrew name for Mera or Isis, remember? The writer didn't take her out of the action, nor did they remove her brother Aaron. They simply invented a second brother, one of equal political and religious power. This would be necessary to accomplish the Exodus, and took all that Miriam had done and rewrote it so it was actually he that did them. Voila, Moses. Let's look at what happened, what really happened. The first thing, the writers needed to do was to find a way to include Aaron. He did take a part in the Exodus, and since he was a man, it wasn't necessary to change his character. They were clever. Look at this verse again. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. Now this maid knew exactly who the mother was, and therefore this mother's other children could later be found and brought into the picture. Aaron in particular. In reality, this didn't happen. It was just to identify the parents of Aaron. The big mistake here is that the maiden knew already who the mother was. Why? The writers, even though they changed it, still felt guilty at having to change the story, so what they did was try to keep as much of the original character as they could. With this in mind, let's identify this maiden and see how she knew who the mother was. Pharaoh's daughter had come down to the river, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the riverside. Normally she bathed in the palace. On certain occasions, the priestesses of Isis, the maidens, would bless the river. Now, who do you think would have been there at this ceremony? That's right, the high priestess of Isis, Miriam. She knew who the mother was because it was her own. Important. This wasn't done to identify this woman with Moses, but to establish a plausible link to Aaron. Now, let's look and see who really brought the people out of Egypt. First, we need to establish exactly which goddess we are dealing with. The following verse is a clue. Exodus. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am, hath sent me unto you. And God said, moreover, unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together, and say unto them, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, appeared unto me, saying, I have surely visited you, and seen that which is done to you in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt, and unto the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. I am has sent you. Who is I am? In the scrolls found at the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt in 1945, there is an entire chapter given by a goddess. This goddess uses the word I am when talking to the people. I recommend you acquire a copy and read this for yourself. She identifies herself as I am and the goddess Thunder. She refers to herself as she whose image is great in Egypt. This is, of course, Isis. The name of the poem is Thunder, Perfect Mind. Read it if you really want to learn the truth. Note, it is vital that you remember her other name, Thunder. Later on, all these pieces are going to fall into place, and the larger picture they reveal will not